belabor all these charts too much, but you know, we just had a massive wheat crop here in Canada and globally last year, and so you know, lo and behold, I guess wheat prices are kind of ho-hum. Well, it's because there's a heck of a lot of it out there. One of the things we have had though is great export movement out of Canada. So you know, the wheat price might be a little ho-hum, but we had big yields. And we're moving it like the Dickens, and so that part's been good. I'm a little wary about whether we can continue that pace, but so far that's been a really good story on the wheat side. Global supplies are large, also as I mentioned, and so you know, prices are in the short term here. You know, wheat is often like the geopolitical sandbox if people want to trade ag commodities because there's turmoil in the world, and wheat's not the deepest market in the world, and so it tends to overshoot. And I think that's what we've been seeing on the futures side here. I think wheat prices were justified in firming. I think what we've been seeing the last little bit has been a little rambunctious. So they're too cautious about that wheat futures market in the short term, even though longer term not necessarily negative. So this is a graph of Canadian wheat production, non-durum production, so it's spring wheat and a little bit of winter wheat in there. Huge, right? And it was done by, here it's by grade, so just to kind of reflect not just that we had a huge crop, but overall it was a good quality crop. Okay, so there's a heck of a lot of wheat around. It was good quality though, that really helps us actually bomb it out the door, and that's what we've been seeing. So this graph here is non-durum wheat exports, and again it's CGC data, like cumulatively by week. And so that blue line is what we've done so far this year. We're ahead of last year, which itself was a record. And so we've just been exporting a heck of a lot of wheat. And that's a good story, right? Like maybe the price isn't, as where we'd like it to have been. But it's, if the yields are there and it's moving, at least it's moving, okay? And so that part's been good. It's also why, like, for example, you have companies that are, again, you guys know your backyard here better than I do, but probably companies, hitting targets or putting on specials or those sorts of things. They got to get their hands on the wheat. The trains are moving. At least it's, at least the wheat has been moving. But, here's the challenge. This is a graph of production across like the major exporters. So you think about the EU, Russia, Ukraine, Canada, Australia, that sort of thing. Huge production, right? And it wasn't one of those situations where it's like, someone had a bumper crop and then it was kind of average somewhere else. It was, I don't want to say crept up on us, because that's not quite the right way to phrase it. But if we, for example, looked at this chart in August, it's like, oh, okay, it's probably a little bigger than last year, that sort of thing, but it's not that huge. And then it's like month after month, oh, Canada got bigger, the US got bigger, Australia got bigger, Argentina got bigger. One more month, oh, Canada's even bigger yet, Argentina's even bigger yet, Australia's even bigger yet. All of a sudden it's like, holy cow, like across the board, you ended up having actually just crops got bigger like everywhere. Okay, so there's a lot of wheat globally, and that's why prices kind of are under some pressure. So we're exporting it. But we've got to be competitive to keep that wheat moving. By the way, there's good demand for quality wheat. We have good quality wheat here, and so that's helped with us moving it. But this is a graph of world wheat production and yields. Okay, and so one of the reasons why I guess I'm not negative on wheat going forward, and I want to be cautious about not creating a too ambitious an outlook for prices. Barring some weather challenges. But like last year we had record production and yield. Like what are the odds of having like record yields again? Could happen, but chances are you end up having just a bit of a more normal-ish type of a yield outlook, and so that naturally is going to mean we're going to have a little less production. Okay, so again we have some cushion going in. So unless we run into some real weather problems, it's let's not get too carried away. But I'm not necessarily negative, because we might actually just have a little less production, because what are the odds of having record yields again? Who knows? But chances are we start running into some smaller crops. So for example, this is a graph of non-durum wheat acres. So again, there's a little bit of winter wheat. It's mostly spring wheat in Canada. And so for next year, probably flattish. And so StatsCan showed, I think, basically flat winter wheat acres for next year. And we would agree with that. We think we're probably flat for non-durum wheat acres. But again, last year we had a huge yield. So if our yields kind of come back to a little bit more normal-ish, like we'll have a smaller wheat crop next year in Canada. Even if we have, let's call it decent yields, just not record yields. A little less production, okay? This is a graph of the U.S. Drought Monitor, okay? And so there's a whole lot of red and orange in there. And if you look at, for example, the Southern Plains, they're like really dry. Parts of Montana are really dry. Now, one of the challenges of these drought maps, as soon as you have 2 or 3 good rains, everyone forgets this map exists. So I don't want to sit there and say, oh, the U.S. winter wheat crop is burning up and they're not going to have any wheat down there. But when they're really dry, going into some critical weather, and now if all of a sudden some rains don't show up, okay, maybe that wheat crop is a little bit small in the U.S. and that sort of thing. So I just throw that up there as an example, not a prediction that all the U.S. wheat crop is going to suck. I'm not saying that. Just to kind of flag some areas where we could see some, a little less production than last year. So, just a couple things we're keeping an eye on, and again, reasons why maybe wheat's not quite as heavy as it was last year. This is a graph of global wheat prices across a bunch of different countries and the major exporters. And I guess the one I just wanted to kind of highlight a little bit, there's sort of that green and blue on the bottom. That's Russia and EU wheat. There's sort of been let's just say there's sort of the Walmart blue light special, I guess, if you will, for global wheat prices, like they sell the cheapest. If that price is creeping up a little bit, that's kind of prices sort of trending a little bit in the right direction. The higher prices on there, like for example, Australia, US, us, we sort of got popped up a little bit higher. Partially because there's some higher quality wheat up here, so that's partially reflected in that. But also, futures markets kind of drive that price up a little bit. We can't get too far ahead of Russia and the EU, or else we're not competitive. But again, just to kind of highlight that point that we are starting to see prices move a little higher, even in sort of the deeply discounted suppliers. And so that's kind of trending a little bit in the right direction. But again, it's let's not get too carried away until we have some real genuine production threats. I mean, wheat's pretty resilient. They grow it all over the place. It's part of the reason why you don't have that many price spikes. But again, maybe we're not quite as heavy next year. This is a graph of Minneapolis hard-red spring wheat futures, and we're just going back over the last couple of years here or so. And again, we've had this run up here recently. I think we've overshot here. Like again, I think this is a function of war in the Middle East. Someone in some office somewhere in New York or Toronto is sitting there saying, "Click buy wheat," and I think that's kind of what we've got here a little bit. So I as much as I think wheat was justified in firming, I think this is a little bit of an overshoot here on the futures side. But again, looking at the seasonal, this is a seasonal price of hard-red spring wheat. And, kind of being sort of flattish in the first part of the year is pretty common. Again, it's sort of catching a little bit of this overshoot on the futures side. But there's a pretty strong tendency for prices to kind of firm into spring a little bit. And so the futures market might give some of this back. It's a bit of an overshoot, but I'm not necessarily that. I'm going to talk about it on both sides of my mouth, so I'm going to try and communicate this the right way. I think futures have overshot, so I would not be complacent about that if a person is behind on their wheat sales. But there is a pretty good tendency for good movement in that sort of thing into spring, and so this isn't necessarily a sweep the bins moment. I just wouldn't be complacent about this rally, especially if someone's a little bit behind on their sales. So something to be maybe mindful of. This I'll just skip over this. This is all stuff I think we already chatted about. Okay, I'm just going to talk briefly.